Okay. Hey Jeff, how you doing?
Good.
Good. So you and me so far. I know Ed for sure is coming. Let me open up my notebook to a clean sheet. So we'll just hang out for a moment. We have a prompt group.
Yeah.
And I wound up leaving a message for David and Michael and Connor, but I spoke to you and Ed, and Judy was asking about the meeting, so I think she might be coming. Are you okay with Judy is asked to become a member? Do you see any issue with us adding Judy as a member so we go up to 7?
You mean Judy Crimmon?
No, Salato.
Um,
Judy Salato, who's joined us a couple of times. Oh, we're recording, so actually maybe you want to tell me offline.
yeah.
Just saying. and there she is. Okay, we'll talk offline. Hi there. Now, Judy, you go by Judy, I think, right?
You can go by Jude or Judy. Either
Jude
one.
or Judy. I know, then I get confused. So, but that's okay. So
Either
we
way.
have Jeff, we have Connor, we have Judy. Oh,
Maybe you should make me Jude because Judy's on the planning board.
well, right there you go. So, okay, we'll try to.
Planning boards anymore, but there we are.
I'll see how good my memory is.
Yeah,
Okay. Hi, Connor. I can see your name there. Are you there? Can you hear me? Well, so we think we have Connor, but we're not quite sure. But I will close out of this and get my agenda up.
Test. Can y'all hear me?
Oh, yes, I can hear you, Connor. Can you hear me?
Yes. All right. Very good.
Okay. So the things that we can't officially call the meeting to order till we have a 4th person. So we're still hopeful because we can either have Ed, David, or
Right.
Michael. So we'll see what we get. But anyway, I'll go through. I'll share my screen. And we'll go through the agenda, and then I probably, well, and if it's an unofficial meeting, we can probably still get done what we hope to get done. So we'll officially open the meeting and adopt the agenda when we get more people. So the minute status, I did send out the minutes from our December meeting, and I was just going to say what's going on with the laws in progress. Where is the wireless water supply protection, housing oversight task force, sign regulations, and scenic overlay. And scenic overlay, Connor, I'm glad you're here because that's the big thing for you. And then the plan for our next meeting, which is in 2 weeks, is the housing oversight task force presentation to our committee. And the next thing I think that the next big thing we're going to attack is that NCLI, LI1 law. So that's kind of what's on the agenda. So at some point we'll get more people on, but even if we don't, this can be a work session where I'm interested in people's answers on some things, because the work session part of the meeting was going to be scenic overlay. So I'll go look at.
Just to jump in, just to quickly overview.
And you're kind of faint, Connor. I can hear you, but you're kind of faint.
Can you hear me better now?
Better, yes.
Okay. So where we're at with the scenic overlay, I think almost everyone's aware we had a very good meeting with the planning board where we discussed in a workshop meeting what there and the public's concerns were. And we do have some new angles to approach. Like, for example, I'm looking for it. I can get more into it later, but the concern about driveway standards and who, issues approvals for driveway standards, the CEO versus the planning board. So in any event, some new things to take a look at, but most importantly, I spoke to Bill today, who told me that the Association of Towns is kicking it to the county planner.
Well,
So
hang on a second. I hear some other noise. So anyway, so I'm making notes here. The Association of Towns is taking what to the where?
So you remember at the last meeting, I believe it was.
With the timeless protection of ADT,
Sorry,
it's safe to
there's
say
something that keeps cutting through. Can we all
they're all
make sure we're
set
muted?
with amazing employees like
I just muted Ed. Okay. So go
So-
ahead.
So what was I gonna say? So we had submitted a lot of what was discussed at the planning board, and but prior to the planning board meeting, to Bill McKenna
Mhm.
for comment from the Association of Towns. And
Well, and let me just there we go. Because there was a document, and I'm sharing my screen still, as you can tell. So there was a document where I documented really the input. It's, 90% of this is what you and Ed said, with a couple more statements added from the conversation that we had back in November. But did you send this document, or you sent a version of this document? Or did you have a whole totally new document?
it was that and another document that got sent over.
Okay.
Outlined the questions a little bit more specifically, because this was just our notes. It's,
Right.
which is very nice. But in this other one, I in the email, I'd asked some of the questions. Now, again, more questions got raised at this planning board meeting, so I want
Right.
to take some time to delve into that. But where we're at right now is that Bill McKenna, as I spoke to him today, has told me that he has sent over and should be. I'm going to be following up with him later to keep me CC'd on these emails. He has engaged the county planner, I believe, with our notes, because the Association of Towns, I guess, is either kicking it to them or is passing the buck on it.
Mhm. Okay. So, kind of, they said take to the county, right?
So where that leaves us, I think, is I want to get the chance to get some opinion to weigh in on some of our ideas around
Mhm.
fine structures and creating funds to fill in and repair scenic damage where there is no either clear violator, or or said violator can't be reached, but among other things. So that's sort of where we're at now. We're in a little bit of a holding pattern, but Ed's, I see, joined us, and
Yes.
he has formatted some of the language that we were talking about. And I think once I hear back from the planner, the follow up will be to after, I would hope, at least one round of Q&A over this, to present these as official or final recommendations from the ZRC.
Well, okay. So let me, okay. So I'm gonna step back for a minute before we move forward. So we do have Ed. So Ed joined at 6:35. So I consider our meeting to have started at 6:35 because that's when we had our quorum. So do I have and the agenda, which Ed can kind of look at here, but we just kind of reviewed. So do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Yay, Connor. Do I have a second?
Was the agenda distributed? I don't recall getting it.
Well, I did it like an hour before the meeting. I sent an email an hour before the meeting, and the agenda was one of the things that I sent.
I'm not seeing it, Laura. Sorry.
I don't see
Oh.
it either.
Well, I sent,
It's in an email. There's nothing attached to it.
well,
It says more information on the scenic overlay.
I sent two emails. I sent, yes. So I sent an email, materials for tonight's meeting at 5:17. So so you're looking at the email, more information for our scenic overlay, because that was information that it was a string of emails that I thought were of interest to our discussion.
I have a feeling
which
you sent it to the Woodstock email, because I don't
Okay,
have
so
anything
materials for tonight's meeting, and let me go and you'll be able to look and see where I sent it. So for Connor, for you, I sent it to Connor Wank at Gmail,
Yeah,
and I think that's what you like. And Jeff, for you, I sent it to Jeffrey A. Collins at Gmail.
No, the material for you sent to the town one. I'm seeing it there now.
Well, I'm showing, so I'm showing you the actual email that I sent and the address that it shows. So I definitely sent it to Jeffrey A. Collins at gmail.com because I thought that you preferred that, Jeff, to your woodstockny.org.
I definitely do, but I didn't get it there. Let me just
Did you
see.
get it anywhere?
Yeah, in the Woodstock.org.
Really? Huh. Well, that's very odd because you can see what I shows. And so, Connor, you didn't get it on your Gmail either?
No.
But you can see I sent it to you and you can see that it's got your Gmail and I sent it.
Very strange.
Yeah, very, very, very strange. I don't know what the answer is. Because you can see I sent it at 5:17, so I sent it an hour and a half ago.
I didn't get it either, Laura, so I'm not sure.
Oh, there's Michael, yay.
Yeah,
Um,
I didn't get it either, yeah. So.
Well, that's a very odd thing because, and I sent it to your Gmail as well. I don't know whether there's a Gmail issue.
Yeah, maybe there's something going on, just maybe it's one of those.
Ed, did you get it? So Ed, I'm curious what, yeah, and I know I muted you, Ed, sorry. Yep. And Ed's still on mute. There you go.
Yes, I received it.
That's fine.
For COVID-19 on December 16th.
So it may be a Gmail issue because everybody on Gmail didn't get it.
Attending multiple public events without.
And I sent it to Jude also.
I got it.
Yay, okay. I think it's
Whoever's listening to the news in the background, can you mute yourself?
well, yeah. I just muted it. So okay. Okay. So anyway, I definitely sent it out, and you guys didn't see it. But since we have two people that joined, since I went over it, so what's in the agenda is open the meeting.
Sorry to interrupt, but I found it. It's in spam. I don't know why.
Yeah, a good place for it. Yay! If everybody looks at if you look at your spam.
It's in spam for me too.
Hallelujah. I now know where I stand. Okay. Anyway, so okay, adopt the agenda, minute status, which of course, and someday I'll send an email saying approve all these minutes, but in any event, so I except for a 5 meeting gap where I need to still give you minutes, I do have minutes for stuff. Status of laws in progress. We'll talk about regulating wireless, water supply protection, housing oversight task force, sign regulations, and scenic overlay. So these are really our topics for today, and then our next meeting. So that being said, Connor moved that we adopt the agenda. Do I have a second? Well, now, of course.
I'll second.
Oh, yay, there's David.
I don't
Yay.
know, for some reason I had a problem getting in here.
Yeah, well, we have a full crew here, so that's fabulous. So David seconded it. All in favor, I guess raise your hand because some people
Aye.
are muted. Aye. Yay. Perfect. So we'll say that's approved. All righty. So I'm going to go down through. So you do all over time have minutes for a lot of stuff, but we haven't yet gotten everybody to approve them. But the minutes are, we will get them approved in the background one of these days. And I'm going to try to widen my screen. I don't seem to be able to do it. That's okay. I'll worry about that later. So regulating wireless, and speak up because I can't see quite everybody. So speak up. I can't see Connor is who I can't see, or Jude. Okay, so regulating wireless, Andrew Campanelli, since we spoke last, we spoke and recommended that Andrew Campanelli use the Fishkill law to make a law for Woodstock, and the town board agreed with that approach. And Bill McKenna has spoken with Andrew Campanelli, who agreed that's what he's going to do, and he'll do it with the same amount of money that we've already agreed with him, which makes sense because he was going to be upgrading, he was going to redline the code that came out of this committee, and he said it would take less work to change the Fishkill law, so it makes sense that he would do it for no more than the previous agreed amount of money. So the money is all agreed to, the direction is agreed to. What's missing is Andrew Campanelli committing a date when he's going to get it to us. And I spoke to Bill McKenna right before this meeting, and neither he nor I confirmed I hadn't seen anything from Andrew Campanelli. Neither has Bill. He has a couple of calls into Andrew to find out what's going on with this law he's building for us. So we have a plan, we just don't have a date. So in any event, that's where that stands. Water supply protection, the town board still needs to finalize the decision as to the map to use. Steve Winkley is presenting to the town board tomorrow evening. And Ed, I don't know whether, I had a couple questions, Ed, for you. One is, do you have any contact information for Steve Winkley? Because I don't know whether it makes sense for me to try to talk with Steve. I'd kind of like to know what he's going to say. The map, Ed, that you had shared was the one that came from Steve Winkley, and I think that that's the map to use. But what's interesting is Ken Panza is the one that reached out to Steve Winkley and got him on the town board agenda, and Ken Panza is pushing for that NRI map. So it seems odd to me that Ken Panza, who's pushing for the NRI map, which I think has way too, it's got everything for everybody, but we want a map that just matches our law. So the NRI map is, a wonderful map, but I think not for our purposes. I think that the Steve Winkley map is good for our purposes. So I'd like to know ahead of time what Steve Winkley's message is going to be. So, and Ed, you're currently muted because I did mute you. I'll officially ask you to unmute if that helps. And I didn't know whether you have any information about Steve Winkley.
Well, I have, I worked very close with him for years, getting the watershed protection overlay district written. And so I contacted him, and he had in his files the map he had provided back a few years ago, and I gave it to the town board. But meanwhile, Panza had proposed using this complicated large map. And I think this may be a way for Ken Panza to back away from his proposed overcomplicated map. He's also getting that woman from the health department is going to be on the board. She's good too, and she gave information to Panza and me about the watershed protection overlay district as being a good thing to pass, and she'll support Steve Winkley. His map, I'm sure she'll support, and I think that's a way for Ken Panza to sort of back away with from his proposal.
Well, in fact, and become a leader in the new direction, so to speak, perhaps. So does it make sense for you or I to talk to Steve Winkley before tomorrow's board meeting, to not be surprised at what he says? Because I don't know.
I don't think he had to go back through his old computer files and reconstruct at my asking him the map listing all the property numbers for the so he had to do work. So he's aboard. It was his map. He created the map. I can't imagine ever that he would not be in favor of using this map.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
I have a question. What the board never sent this when they rejected that when they removed the overlay district. They voted to remove the overlay district. They never sent it to the state, did they?
No, that's why it was never passed as law. It has to be repassed.
Well,
have-
that was taking away all the protections of the water overlay district.
No, they never had the overlay district passed. And, I mean,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
you
If they
have-
never passed it, that's fine.
they
But I
passed
was
it.
under the impression that with 2016, it was passed.
No,
And
no,
I
no,
thought
no.
by then they would have sent
No,
it.
there was no aquifer protection overlay district in 1916.
Not 1916, 2016.
No, there was no.
Yeah.
It was passed by Jeremy Wilbur when he was supervisor. And you have 5 days or 7 days to go with the law to the Secretary of State's office in Albany and formally process it.
Mhm.
The town neglected to do that. So it did not become a law.
Okay, that's all I was, because there were some questions about that
No,
that
Because-
came up recently.
no, because I went with Brian Hollander and we brought the new zoning law to the Secretary of State
Mhm.
in 1989, because if we didn't, the law wouldn't have passed,
Right,
been
yeah, it wouldn't have been active.
right.
Yeah. So, okay, all right. So we're not worried about Steve Winkley's message. So that sounds good. And then 2 board members, I talked to Reggie about it to explain my reasons why I thought the Steve Winkley map was the way to go. And he agreed. I haven't spoken to Bennett or Maria Elena about it. And I know that Bill's concerned about it, as he said, well, the map includes the current aquifer and the Cuomo area, because the Cuomo area is a potential secondary aquifer. And Bill McKenna's answer is, yeah, but that's got so many protections on the CSAC, you don't really need to protect it with this. But I would just as soon just have the map as Steve Winkley. So, okay, I didn't know whether Ed, whether you in particular, if anybody wants to join the town board meeting for the Steve Winkley presentation. Apparently there's not much on the agenda except for that. So I don't know whether, Ed, if you have an interest, since you've been with Steve Winkley along the way, if you wanted to attend the town board meeting just to hear firsthand what he says.
Well, I always get an invitation and I might find time to do it. I'm very busy finishing a book, so
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I'll try to carve out some space.
Okay, well, it's 7 o'clock tomorrow night. And again, I think he's just about the only thing on the agenda. So more things could be added before the meeting tomorrow, but the preliminary agenda pretty much just had Steve Winkley. So, and presentations are always at the beginning anyway. So, okay, cool. So that's what's going on with that. And that'll be wonderful to have everybody, rowing the boat the same way on the map. And then we can really get that moving. So that's good. I want to give you a status update on the Housing Oversight Task Force that we call HOTF. We still have bi-weekly meetings, and what we're doing in January is the HOTF is making the rounds to all the boards and committees throughout Woodstock. And in some cases, they're kind of putting more than one board in the same meeting. But the idea is the Housing Oversight Task Force will be going to each board and committee pretty much in the second half of January to talk about where the committee has been so far and next steps, where we've been so far, the reasons for this and that, and some next steps. And one of the next steps is we can expect to see, the current plan is we're expecting to see a copy of the zoning law updates in early March, with everybody having at least 2 weeks, with every committee having at least 2 weeks to review what is seen. So the idea of, 2 weeks from today, we're going to have the HOTF presentation, and it's going to be background information so to really prepare us, so that when we get the actual code update proposal in March, that you'll already know some things about it. And then we'll have 2 weeks to review the code proposal in March. And then the moratorium ends pretty fast. So we are kind of on the move to try to get that moved through. So that's what we're looking at there. And Jeff has volunteered to be the actual presenter of the Housing Oversight Task Force stuff. So that's our plan is, we'll be finding out more about that. And certainly Jeff will be there. I'll be there. Well, 3 of us on the committee are on the Housing Oversight Task Force. So Jeff, Michael, and myself. So we'll already know a lot of it. And this is really going to be for Ed and David and Connor, who have not been in those bi-weekly meetings. And but extremely important, because you all have great input, and very important that we get, this is the time that the Housing Oversight Task Force is bringing everybody on board and having you on board as we go through the next steps, which is where the rubber meets the road, the actual proposed law. So very much want everybody's input on that. Okay, so the next topic, any questions about that? And so Jeff is going to present, and then I'm sure we'll have either Kirk Ritchie or Deborah DeWan, who are the co-chairs. And of course, I'll be on the call, and I expect Michael will too. So we'll have lots of people that can answer questions. Okay, we talked last time, and Michael, I think you had to go at some point. And so when this topic came up, I think you already were not on the call, but there was some discussion about when to put the, because you were interested in, and where is Michael? All of a sudden, I don't see Michael. Michael, are you still there? I saw Michael and I don't see Michael. I can't ask him the question. So, left by 7 o'clock. Okay. All right. So he's not here for me to ask, but the idea was, when to put on our ZRC agenda, but we don't have an answer because he's not here. Fine, Michael. Not here to answer. And that was going to be his thing, because the thought was that he would discuss this at the zoning ZBA. And Jude, I'll ask you, has this been discussed at the ZBA at all? About signs and maybe making some zoning changes to the signs?
No.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that's
about our mission statement. My understanding is our mission statement was to go through a number of things related to the comprehensive plan, and the comprehensive plan needs for zoning changes. I don't believe comprehensive plan talked about sign regulations.
It did not at all. However, item 13 was a umbrella, make whatever changes makes, review other areas of the zoning law that should be changed. So right. So signs was not a top priority item. However, it's included in that umbrella of addressing things that make sense to address.
Well,
I saw Judy's hand up first, and then Ed will go to you.
I've been discussing with Gordon some other things but I thought I would wait to bring up that the ZBA has noticed about the law, or things that perhaps the law hadn't envisioned that are happening. So what I thought, once we get through or you get through all of these things, that would be the opportunity to bring them up.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. So there's no rush. So we can just, I can say that we discussed it, and just, I'll wait till either Michael or maybe Jude, you come back with it. So sign, we'll.
I guess I was hoping that there'd be an end to this committee at some point in time. If we keep adding stuff to our mission, this sounds like an indefinite committee that could go on forever and ever.
Well, there's a good point.
My concern. I mean,
well,
do we have a defined mission, or are we the committee that everyone dumps their zoning changes, showing desired zoning changes on?
Well, I think it's a committee that everybody's going to dump desired zoning changes on. And when we end, that's a good question. We're not close to ending yet, because we had 13 items from the comp plan. We're doing well on a bunch of them. And yes, so your point is a good point. At what point will we end as a committee? That's a very good point. I'm looking, there won't be I won't quickly find the file I'm looking for, so I won't try. Yes, so we have the 12 items, but we've, telecommunications was 2 of them, water protection was 1 of them. The NC and LI changes is 1 of them. We haven't gotten to that yet. You're right, there is a finite list, but as long as we're looking at stuff, and we ought to discuss at what point does this committee end, and but I think the signage is an issue in town, and it's recognized as an issue. So I'm okay with adding that to our list of things that we plan to actively work on. But you've got a good point, Jeff, is that, I would like to add it, but maybe not everybody thinks that's a good idea. So I see Michael's
don't know where this ends. I mean, I have tons of things I'll change in zoning laws. So I just bring every desired change to this committee and say we should all work on it. It's like, I think we're assigned to this given a specific focus. and that was the comprehensive plan requirements for zoning. And this is way out
No.
of district, way out of that.
Item 13 definitely was overall, and I will go see if I can. Let
We
me-
agreed when we formed this committee that there were ancillary issues that we could bring them up. And I've been talking with Michael about sign changes. And we've worked up tentative language for some sign changes. And also I've worked with Connor Wink on scenic overlay, and we have a draft of a substantial set of changes in the scenic overlay district, including us bringing in the tree committee to do some work in the scenic overlay on trees. So, you know,
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't think that was, any of that was in the comprehensive plan.
Yeah, well, this is the list right here. And I can find the words in the comprehensive plan, but this is the list. We had hamlet areas, large parcel areas, natural resources, which is the water protection overlay, scenic overlay, which we're actively discussing, renewable energy was an item, telecommunications, item 6 and 12 went together with the telecommunications law. So those are two of the items. Housing and housing PRD. So 7, we had those two things. Those are really being spearheaded now with the Housing Oversight Task Force, which is doing the deep dive of what needs to get done there. So that's that. Parking was an item, special permit uses was an item, site plan review and approval, shared workspace business incubators, and then 12 goes with 6. And then periodically review the zoning law. And that's the umbrella catch-all. Periodically review the zoning law. So that was one of the these are the 13 items that came out of the comp plan. So I do think that before we're finished, before we pick an end date for our committee, I do believe that we should list what are the things that are not part of the 12 that we want to put in the category of periodically review the zoning law. I'm totally fine putting the signs in because I think there's some outdated stuff in there. But again, periodically review the zoning law clearly was a comp plan item. I can find the exact words, but and if I look on 17, I might be able to find them. So let me just do that.
I'm just raising a concern. I just don't want this to become a catch-all for the entire, everything that Woodstock wants to do with zoning personally. And if it is, that's great. You guys can continue on. I don't have the time or energy to do that.
Yeah, and I know you're into a lot of important stuff, and I get it. I get it. So this was the comp plan description. To remain current and viable, a task force should be created to periodically review the zoning law for possible changes. So yes, so we'll yeah, and again, we're onto some hot stuff, and we'll see. We may want to get a good stopping point because yeah, because you're right. How many years? Yeah, how many years do you want to be on the zoning revision committee? There you go. So it's a valid question. So, okay, all right. But I'm good. Is there anybody besides Jeff who sounds like would prefer not to address signs as a committee? Does anybody else not want to address signage as a committee? Okay. And
Also,
Michael, are
if
you?
we do address signs, we got to focus on the stuff that is more, I mean, we have a lot of stuff that is directly in the comprehensive plan, which is our
Yes.
primary purpose. And signs is not a primary purpose. If you want to go to
Yeah.
secondary purposes, great. Let's do it after we finish the primary purposes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, right. Okay. So, and there are some of either of the primary purposes of the 12 items. Some things are, in my opinion, are hotter than others. And yes, telecommunications, housing, scenic overlay is pretty hot. And signs may come before some of these other things of the 12, but we'll see how that goes. It looks like Michael keeps trying to join, but so Michael, you're back, but you're on mute. But we'll
Yeah,
put,
I'm just having some on and off connectivity issues.
yeah, okay. So we had a discussion about signs and when we should discuss them with the ZRC. And the request from Jeff is we push that back until we get other things done. So I know, and Michael, I would kind of put you as kind of leading the sign discussion. And are you okay, Michael, with pushing that back for now?
Okay.
a TBD, or did you, I know the next step for that I thought was you were going to talk with the ZBA and try to get a finite list of what the ZBA was hoping to accomplish
No.
with sign changes. And are you expecting to do that in the near future? And would you rather see it? Was your hope that we would address signs sooner rather than later, or what was your hope?
It was just, maybe it was a misunderstanding of what the committee is set up to do. I thought if there was some aspect of the zoning law that did need to be addressed, this was the committee for it. But if it is the comprehensive plan zoning revision committee, then I understand that too.
No, in fact, what we just, okay.
Okay,
What we just said is this committee is there. The comprehensive plan had 12 specific areas to investigate, plus one that said periodic review of the zoning law for changes. So in my view, addressing signs is clearly part of the mission of this committee. Jeff has raised the point of what should the priority be? When should we do that? Because some
Okay.
things were specifically spelled out and some things are clearly urgent, like water protection is urgent and housing is urgent. So some things are clearly urgent. So it's a question of where do we put it? Where do we put it on in the priority list? So if you, and the other thing too is doing signs is probably easier to do than the LINC1. The LINC1 is a law already proposed by the planning board. I've already sent it out to this committee several times. We haven't ever gotten, it hasn't reached the top of the agenda. When we do address it, as Ed had said, it's going to be a big deal. It's going to be a lot of work to crawl through it. Something like signs may be a quick thing that we can address and do and get off our plate. So as I look at the overall scope of what this committee does, and I agree with Jeff, we might not want to be adding a million things, but signs might be something that while we're waiting to start the next thing, maybe we can look at signs and make a difference. So I'm personally fine with addressing signs whenever we have some guidance, say from the ZBA, about what do you think is working, not working? What are you thinking we ought to tweak with the signage? I'm okay to address it kind of whenever, Michael, you're ready. I view you as taking the lead on it. And your to-do is going to be to talk to the ZBA, come back with something of what the ZBA thought ought to change, because you get all these appeals about people that want to do things beyond the law. So I was looking for some guidance from you, from the ZBA, on what we wanted to look at. So if you're thinking that's way in the future, I'll take it. I won't be bringing it up on every meeting. If we think it's way in the future, if you think that you're imminent, like in the next month or two, you're going to have a list of stuff, then if we're ready to discuss it, it may make sense to do it if it's a quick thing. If it's a big thing, then I do agree with Jeff. It should come after the other comprehensive plan items. If we think it can be a smaller thing that we can address and do, then I'm thinking we may just fit it in, because we may have a spot to fit it in as we go along. But it depends, Michael. I view you as leading this because you brought up the topic, and you were going to have a to-do to go talk to the ZBA to get some things, recommendations from the ZBA for law changes. So it really hinges on your timing for that.
okay, well, I can say that is not imminent.
Okay, all right. So I will remove it from, I will have it be that we'll address it when you bring it up again. Instead of me having it on my to-do list to bring up, I will bring it up. Okay, bring up.
Fantastic, that works.
Okay, okay, so I'm gonna say, let Michael bring up, remove from the list until then. Yeah, okay, and I'm fine with it. I'm here to coordinate things in the order this body wants done. So I am totally fine with that. Okay, so we're done with that. So so we know what we're doing. So we're the big topic is scenic overlay. We're about to get to that. So so at our next meeting in 2 weeks, Housing Oversight Task Force presentation, and I was hoping to discuss when we might want to look at the NCLI law, which is the kind of long thing that we think will take a while to do. But do we want to then start to do that in our first meeting in February? So that'll be the question I'll ask in 2 weeks. But the main topic there is going to be the Housing Oversight Task Force presentation. So all that being said, what I want to bring up is two things. And And sorry, let me come back. There we go. Okay. So what's happening with the scenic overlay? Let me come back here. So a number of us, well, Connor, of course, because he's on the planning board, and I was at the meeting. I don't recall if anybody else. Oh, Jude was on the meeting. Okay. So Connor, Jude, and I were on the meeting. Just let me make my notes. Connor, Jude. Okay. So we were all at the planning board meeting. And what I had asked the planning board towards the end of the meeting was, granted, there was like a 2-hour session or however long the session was, of a lot of people saying a lot of stuff. And then my question was, okay, so planning board, now that you've heard everything everybody has said, and the planning board is an extremely important body in this town, what planning board are you recommending for scenic overlay changes? And so it was, I kind of had to laugh in a way, because then I got back an email from Melissa, I think I had the name right, as secretary of the planning board, saying, for all the attendees, give us your thoughts. So I'm an attendee, I'll give thoughts, but I'm also the chair of the zoning revision committee. And as I give my thoughts, I wanted to fold in what you all think, and the documentation that I have 2 documents that I wanted to go over with, and I have a bunch of notes from the meeting. And I don't want to steal the work Connor did. I don't want to steal the work Ed did, because this document that I sent out, the same email that 3 of you who all are on Gmail, oh, it's in your spam. You do have it. Okay. So if you look in your spam, when I sent the meeting notice for today, the same document that had the agenda, the minutes from the last meeting, the reference document, and while I'm thinking about it, the only thing that you really care about the reference document, by the way, is if you look in the reference document, if you look at the end of that, future past meetings, in the past meetings, I have the YouTube. If you ever want to know where do you find the YouTube to look at each meeting, it's in there. So you don't really, I send it every time we meet just so that you have that. You don't really care about that, except I want to make sure that, you know, I send it so you always have the access to the latest meetings. But anyway, so I do want to have a, so this document, the brainstorming notes, again, I don't want to steal and say, I don't want to make it look like these are all my ideas, but I do agree with the ideas. And as zoning revision committee, we probably do agree with a lot of these ideas. So I do want to send something that says, I can either send, here's what my opinion is, or I can say, here's what the zoning revision committee opinion is. But for example, when I wrote this up, I started up, I put Connor's name and Ed's name first to say a lot of it came from them. So I want to do it in a way that gives credit where credit is due, but I want to, so I guess my questions, and let me, and aware, and the best way to find it is Peter Frost. That's the way I find it. I had it up, but then, so I want to put his email up. Well, it's the same one that I sent to everybody, so never mind. I will, sorry, let me get rid of the search and let me just go to what I sent. More information. So the 2 things that are of interest is this one more information email that had a lot of what Peter thought. And my hope of this part of the discussion is that I'll know what you all think. So, because I would like to give something in writing back to Peter. And I guess one way to do it is to say, is there anything here that you disagree with? And then if we flip over to the email that Peter sent, to say, because Peter shared some ideas also, and I'm interested in your thoughts on that. So what I'll hope to do is I'll just go through this document and mark it up based on what people do and don't agree with. And I know, Connor, I know you said you sent a different document to Bill McKenna to go out to the Association of Towns and actually go to the county planner. So, but I'm not getting in the way of that. I'm just trying to say, as I respond to Peter and the planning board, of what are things that we hope the planning board considers as they come back with their official statement, I'm feeding him some input. And then, and if he picks up stuff from what I send him that comes from our conversation, then I think that we'll have a document that, there'll be a stronger document if we can say, not only do we believe something, but oh, by the way, the planning board thinks it. Because we want to, well, I guess here's the other thing too. And I know I just said a minute ago at the next meeting, I asked, when do we want to talk about NC and the LI1 districts? Well, maybe that whole conversation comes after scenic overlay, because now that everybody's doing a deep dive in scenic overlay, maybe that's the next big thing we should address. So I want to give something to Peter Cross. Peter
Can we
Cross.
talk about the document, Laura? You've been talking about the document for about 20 minutes. Can we just talk about the document? I'm sorry, it's.
No, that's all right. No, Jeff, I appreciate your input. You're good. You're right on. So yes. All right. So what I'm hoping in this, I'm going to do a save as, so I don't lose the old one, and I'm going to rename it so I can mark this one up based on our conversation. So what my question really here is, we go through this, is if there are things that we don't agree with as a committee, what do we agree with? So first of all, I'm trying to give credit to Connor and Ed, because I don't want to steal credit from them. The things that came out of that original discussion, and let me just move this so you can see it a little better, and I can get through the scroll bar. All right. So scenic overlay. Right now, brainstorming notes, not 0C final recommendations. I'd like to transform this into what are our recommendations. Need to address mitigation prevention. Note that people perpetrating laws often have limitless resources. Start holding people accountable with potential for fines. Owner seller, for example, cuts down and removes trees before selling. So my question is there anything here that anybody on the board disagrees with, that if I send this document, for example, over to Peter, giving Ed and Connor credit, is there anything here that should come out because we as a committee in general don't agree with it?
So the first one, if owner seller cuts down and removes trees, we have no way to enforce that. Absolutely no way to enforce that. We don't know
Why
when a
not?
property
Why
is
don't
sold.
we have a way to enforce
How
that?
do we know when a property is sold? How do we know when a property is sold?
Don't they put it in the realtor thing there? They have to,
Who's gonna,
down in the county,
what law allows us to pre-approve a sale of a property? We don't have a way to do that. I mean, I
Well, we
don't
can-
agree with the intention here, but
Mhm.
practically we can enforce this.
Jeff, can you hear me?
Yeah,
All right. So at the meeting, it was brought up the idea of creating well, where do I start? In the cases where either there's an inability to track down the violator, a violation occurs, or in something like this where maybe it becomes unclear which party is responsible, we talked about pursuing a fund paid for using the money collected from people in violation needing to pay fines and such, to have the town address those issues. That when there is a property, and you may ask how would that be done? It was discussed to do a land survey, or essentially, I guess what I is a better way of putting it, is to start to catalog the view shed using drone technology, to hire either a firm or an expert drone photographer who can take essentially baseline photographs of the area that will allow us to determine, at least, if not who is responsible for the violation when it occurred.
I get all that kind of, but this is not what this is saying. What this is saying is that if an owner seller cuts down and removes trees before selling the property, we don't know that. There's no way to know that.
Well, the way to know that is that, again, this is in the case of what happens when someone does something wrong. The way we would know it is that it gets reported. Is that somebody does say, here,
Who's reporting it?
neighbors Anybody?
But if they don't, then what happens? 9 times out of 10,
And
the,
then,
the,
then
the property and the front of the planning board, I believe no one reported it, right? No one knew what happened until
Well,
afterward.
all right, let's go through it then, because before we edit this all again, this is brainstorming notes, and hence I'm gonna, before I go down the rabbit hole of defending it, I'm not entirely in favor of sending it to the planning board at all, because I don't think we need to rush to a response. Like I said earlier in the meeting, Ed has formatted some language we're working on. I am working on sending Bill an additional set of questions to forward to the county planner based on the conversations we had at the planning board. And so I think we can respond to Peter and say that I mean, personally, in the email you shared from Peter, I agree with everything he said. And I have to add that there is another standard in the scenic overlay that needs examination, because it's redundant. In one hand it says the ZEO has the power to do something, and in the other hand it says the planning board has to, so it needs touching up. But in any event, in regards to number one, what happens when we don't find out until later on down the line, maybe when it comes to site plan review from the planning board? At that point, we would make an attempt to determine whether or not the cutting happened before or after sale, probably using that same database or whatever databases we have at our disposal. And if we can't make that determination, either the planning board or or maybe perhaps in this case the tree committee, to submit a proposal to the town for the town to pay out of the fund, as we discussed, to have that view shed remediated at no expense to the applicant.
What you're saying now kind of makes total sense to me, that we have a fund that can remediate whatever happened in the past. That's not what this sentence is saying here in number one.
Well, I adjusted it to get out of the seller, because Jeff, you raised an excellent point that we don't know when something sells. But if an owner cuts down and removes trees, find the owner. And if the owner does it and sells and nobody caught him, then we're in a bit of a bind. But you've raised a good point, so I did adjust that to that.
Before we go too much further though, I'm just gonna throw out that these are great brainstorming notes for what for the meeting that they occurred at, and we've come some distance since then. We're about to get a lot more information that will perhaps make a lot of this moot. I really don't think we should be sending this as a blanket response.
No,
Okay. Well, what should we say then as a zoning revision committee? What should we be sending to the planning board, if anything? I mean, Connor, you, Jude, and I attended the meeting, but Connor, you're a member of the planning board, so you might be sending your own document to the planning board. What should we as a zoning revision committee send to the planning board?
What I'd like to do, and I'm totally open to suggestion, and maybe this isn't satisfactory, but what I'd like to do is, if we feel the need to respond immediately, let's respond to what Peter said. We don't need to inundate him with, all the other things that he heard in the meeting and we all, know are on our radar, but let's take into consideration what he said here. I have the email open in front of me in terms of, talking about preserving the environment, avoiding due diligence. These are all things that we're cognizant of. What I'd like to do is have the opportunity to review the language me and Ed are working on a little bit more, send that along with my updated and additional questions from the planning board meeting to Bill, so the county planner can review everything, and also now have formatted language to really look over. And from there, I would really love to see a follow-up meeting, whether it's us hosting the planning board or members of the planning board or vice versa, another meeting where the public can come and be a part of it as much as they were last time, where I guess I should actually preface, this meeting would occur after we have the response from the county planner, and the zoning revision committee has a chance to then punch up or discuss or re-examine what we have after that point.
Well,
If we
okay.
want to respond right now, I say we just respond to what he said, and I am in support of it, and I would say in that response that I am personally going to review, of course, the concerns of the planning board as laid out here and include them in.
Well, here's specifically what Melissa asked for. The planning board would like your feedback and suggestions from the discussion on December 16th. We plan on having a discussion at the January 20th meeting just to put all thoughts together and start working on a letter to the town board in regards to concerns of the current law, and are looking forward to everyone that was involved at the meeting's contributions and thoughts. Please send your notes to me to compile and get to the planning board members by January 14th. I can just respond as me, Laura, Ricky. I don't have to respond as the zoning revision committee. So if it's not appropriate to, if it's not going to work out to try to have a ZRC response, that's fine. I can I can just say what I think, although part of what I think is modified
I think,
because.
Laura, if you look at the document later on where it starts update the scenic overlay law to be more detailed, everything after that is a concrete thing that we can do that makes sense. The stuff before, the stuff before, the brainstorming stuff does not belong in a response, in my opinion. But yes, we do need to understand what minimized tree cutting means and define it. We do need definition for clear cutting. We do need to provide a way for applicant to get permission for tree removal. We need all of those things there. Those are very specific things that we can change the zoning code to make what we need to have happen. That part of it, I like. That part of it, I think we should say, this is what we feel like we need to work on. And I'm guessing that Ed and Connor are doing exactly that.
Okay. So what I might do then, we'll start here then. So is there anybody that disagrees? And thanks, Jeff, for that. So is anybody that disagrees? So I can say that these things, just we'll go through them and see if anybody disagrees and says we shouldn't say this is what the ZRC thinks. Minimize tree cutting, be clear on what it means. Minimum, no definition of clear cutting does not apply in the scenic overlay. Any cutting that can be seen from below needs to be prohibited or from a distance. Provide a way for the applicant to get permission for tree removal and define the circumstances where it's possible. Note times when negotiation with the application, with the applicant should be, sorry, let me just change that. Applicant would be appropriate. Perhaps engage the tree committee to weigh in on tree cutting requests, give them a budget. Do not allow non-essential tree removals and define what that is. Be clear that no topping limit of healthy trees is allowed. Find those that don't comply. Clarify how to determine who needs to be held accountable for tree cutting that happened a while ago. And that's kind of what that first thing is. Well, part of what the first thing is saying is.
Right, but this is a concrete step of what needs to happen, not the brainstorming stuff. So that's why.
Okay. It doesn't give the answers. It just gives what the direction ought to be.
Exactly.
Okay.
And there's one more thing that I would like to add to this. I think that would be useful, which is to make it clear to owners. Somehow we need to make it clear to people that they are in the scenic overlay.
All right. So the way that is going to be addressed, and we did touch on that in the meeting, is there is there's a form that is sent. Bear with me one moment. I'm going to.
Can it be added to the plat notes for each property, and can it be added to the deed?
Basically, there's a whole discussion about who else can be sort of where is there other accountability to pursue in this process, and one that keeps coming up is the realtors. And there is a type of form. I'm pulling through it right now. Bear with me one second. I can't find it right now. God, what was it called? It's in my notes, but there is a disclosure.
Mhm.
A disclosure document. And those are the kind of things that are absolutely routine, normal course for any practicing real estate agent. And and it came up, and we as a town could likely require anyone selling property in the scenic overlay. I'll point out also in Peter's message that he recommends the establishment of a view shed district, which I am totally in support of to even further delineate this. But the idea is that any activity that happens in there when the property gets sold in that area, we could require that they provide a disclosure to their client stating that they've been informed that they have a home in the scenic overlay, that it is subject to 260-100, and that any deviation from those standards will be met with penalty.
Well,
I
they
had a
can,
question.
they can halt a special, the way we've written it is that they can halt a special use permit and certificate of occupancy.
Yeah, which is really all the planning board can do. The SUP.
Well, but we have a whole paragraph in our draft. We have the current scenic overlay is a little bit more than 2 pages. The
Yeah.
draft that Connor and I are working on now is a little more than 4 because we've added things like what we just discussed. And I think the answer is to prepare a recommendation based on the actual law. And you enter, like Connor and I have been entering changes and revisions in the scenic overlay language. And we've padded it out. And Connor's doing most of the work. I'm just as a professional writer, polishing some of it up, but it's Connor's doing most of the work.
And it's your help is so needed and appreciated, Ed. Don't sell yourself short.
So those last 3 bullets, that I think the third bullet from the end, make clear to owners and buyers scenic overlay. I think that, as Connor was saying, is that to require a disclosure from all property sales in Woodstock indicating whether property is part of scenic overlay or not.
And I will add that
You
that
also-
is something that I sent to the county planner. That did make it into the initial email. But like I said, I'm going to review that, and I'm going to forward along questions also raised at that email, in that meeting, and from Peter's email right now.
Okay. Now let me ask a question about the view shed district idea. My point of confusion when I read that from Peter's email was, we have a scenic overlay district. So the whole purpose for the scenic overlay is because it is the view shed. So why wouldn't we just, instead of having this view shed district that's different from the scenic overlay district, why aren't they the same district? I thought that was the whole purpose of scenic overlay.
Well, they may be the scenic overlay is either 1,100 or mostly 1,200 feet above sea level. Maybe you said district can cover districts that are under 1,200 feet. I don't know.
Okay.
I think that's a really, really good point. Also, just dealing with what, like you said, it only really covers elevation, and there are properties up here that don't have any exposure, really. And I don't think it should be about taking a scalpel to that and figuring it out, but perhaps if we even just refer to it as the view shed district, or if it's just something we apply to the scenic overlay, something to establish that within this property there is a specific real estate disclosure form that informs you that you cannot touch trees without approval.
This idea of a view shed district, this is from Cross.
Yes.
Yes.
We should ask him what he specifically means in terms of everything in a zoning law has to have a definition in words. So what is his definition in words of a view shed district?
I'm going to write that down now.
I think the practical thing might be, the whole California Quarry subdivision is below 1,200 feet, but it does appear as if it's,
It's easy to see.
yeah, that plus Raycliffe. They're all below 1,200 feet, but they seem to be in a sensitive view shed.
So does it make sense then to just change the definition of scenic overlay to include those instead of adding yet a different overlay?
Well, because you're making it a nightmare for the planning board then. I mean, that's why we, under advice, chose 1,200 and 1,100 feet, because if you could make it a total nightmare for the planning board to have to deal with special use permits.
How is the view shed make it any easier?
Doesn't make it easier, it makes it harder.
I mean, it may be well-intentioned, but may not be something we can do.
Yeah, but you should ask Mr. Cross what he means as a definition in words and see if we can fit it in. It needs to be defined in words.
So I want to go back.
I
So I want to come back up here.
These are great responses to the letter. I mean, what I'd love to see is, rather than us make haste to reply before January 20th, let's get something that we can send to be discussed on January 20th. That's a great question to bring up at that meeting.
Well, I mean, I want to send something, and I can say it's still brainstorming so that it can still be, take it or leave it kind of stuff. But I definitely, Melissa has asked for input by the 14th, which is Friday. So, I just want to ask a couple of questions up here though, because we do say here, right, I know that Jeff was not fully for any of this stuff. I took out the thing about the seller. I think we are still saying at time of purchase require the realtor to provide a document approved by the town that the purchaser has to sign to acknowledge scenic overlay status and knowledge of scenic overlay laws, and then find the realtor if they don't do it. I'm not sure why that would be a bad idea. Require engineers and architect to follow the law or risk fines, because if an engineer or an architect does the wrong thing in scenic overlay, they probably should be fined. Require arborists to follow the scenic overlay law or risk fines. So if somebody goes and removes trees in the scenic overlay, I would think they should risk fines. The building department should inspect the scenic overlay building permit applicant properties to assess if any cutting has been done. In addition to the fines, repair of the viewscape before a building permit can be granted. I think that's a good idea. Have the planning board assess site plans and make site visits, understand tree cutting is planned, and where removal has already happened, require in the site plan. This is the big issue. The thing that got me upset about the Valley View Way is, for Valley View Way, there were arguments from, well, Peter in particular, about, well, you can't ask somebody to plant a 30-foot tree. Well, I never asked anybody to plant a 30-foot tree. I said, you ought to put on the site plan that you have to plant trees that'll become a 30-foot tree. Plant an oak tree that's 10 feet tall, 8 feet, 10 feet, 12 feet tall, 2 inches around. Plant a series of those, require the site plan to plant these trees. And, so I guess I'm not sure, how the tree committee be part of the SUP plan within the scenic overlay, provide an approval disapproval form with their tree related findings, and set fines that matter to the owners. Well, I'll take out seller, because the owner, realtor, engineers, architects, and arborists who do not follow the law. Jeff. So Jeff, I know you didn't like this, what I'm showing on my screen now. I'm not fully understanding what's wrong with it, except for the fact, as you point out, it might be hard to enforce. Okay, but aside from the difficulty, is there something besides the difficulty to enforce that you think is wrong with this as a vision of what we want to achieve?
I think it's described better in the update, the scenic overlay law, to be more detailed. That's a very detailed description of what we want to get done. This is like, how do we're talking about laws. When we talk about laws, you have to talk about something that is concrete, right? This is like maybe the overall desire around those laws, but
Mm.
it's the laws themselves are, what's the penalty for cutting down a tree? And that's covered in the other one. It's covered in
Okay, so it's
clarify
covered.
and how to determine who needs to be held accountable for tree cutting that happens.
Okay.
Those
Well,
kinds
so-
of things are already there. So, and again, I kind of agree with Connor. Let's just respond to the questions from Peter, or let's just wait until they finish writing the zoning code. I mean, is there the need to get back to someone in a hurry?
Well, yes, because I would like, I attended the meeting and I was sent an email saying, give me your thoughts for consolidation for the planning board to consider because the planning board is going to make a planning board statement. And so the thought is to provide things that can fold into the planning board statement.
Planning board statement of what? I'm sorry, I may have missed that part.
So the planning board held a work session on December 16th, where they recognized that there were a lot of issues with how things are happening. Things are going the wrong way in the scenic overlay. Things are, and let's talk about the issues. Is the issue that the zoning law is not good enough? Is it the issue that enforcement's not good enough? There are a lot of stuff going wrong in the scenic overlay. Let's have a work session to talk about what else going on. And then they said, well, I'll bring up what they said again, right? Melissa's words. We would like your feedback and suggestions from the workshop. So the workshop was a lot of people saying a lot of stuff. And I said at the end of the workshop, I would love to see a planning board recommendation based on everything you've heard. What do you think should be the recommendation regarding the scenic overlay zoning? And they kind of bounced it back to the attendees and said, you tell us what you think. So,
and if I can be just completely honest, I think as the zoning revision committee, there's even more reason for us just not to just throw something out there just to do it. I want to hear what everyone else has to say. I have more lingering questions, not for the planning board, that I need answers before I can say anything meaningful hasn't already been said. So,
And as a member that wasn't part of that committee, that meeting, I have nothing to say. I wasn't part of that meeting. I don't want to have my name on something that represents that I have a response to that meeting. I wasn't there.
well, so I could send, okay, so I can refer to it as brainstorming. I can refer to it as things that, Connor and Ed had input on, and I can refer to it as just ideas that I can take all the, I can take this and move it to start out with these basics, and then put here to say some potential ideas.
I think you should just wait to see what Connor comes up with. You should tell them, send back a set of answers to Mr. Cross's concerns and ask him for a definition of that district. And wait. I mean, Connor's right. We're right on the edge of coming up with something. We have a 4-page document that looks pretty good. I just went to the scenic overlay language and added all this stuff that Connor came up with and that I helped with. And it looks good, but we need further clarification from experts.
And I really do think this January 20th is going to give us even more to think about from the planning board perspective. And just from my having seen you read that email a couple times now, I think that's more directed at the planning board than the rest of us. I know the WEC was on there, and I know that we were on there, but it's mostly, I think what she's asking for is for the planning board to come up with their own recommendations, which even I am, sort of like, let's all be there when that happens, because the planning board isn't going to, be rewriting the zoning law. We will. So, chance to, get more input on the 20th. If you feel strongly to, respond personally, then that's your prerogative. But as far as this board, I'm I wouldn't, if we're going to take a vote on it, I'm not going to vote to send our brainstorming notes, our preliminary questions.
Mhm.
These are all things we discussed at the meeting already, and we're already moving in the right direction. I don't want to
Okay.
just, I don't want to muddy the waters more and have people trying to answer questions that have already been answered.
Because as you say, you and Ed are already answering some questions. Well, I mean, I do want to, okay. I mean, I want to send, because some of these ideas, I think are things that would be good considerations. I think I think the planning board could have done more. The planning board could have required some site plan for this Valley View Way that I understand that now has been approved. I didn't go to the planning board meeting last Thursday, but I understand that's now been approved. And
Now, if you're curious about that, I was probably the pivotal vote in that one. We're talking about the Swan, right?
well, is that the one, the Valley View Way? That's the one where they topped off the trees and said, "Oh,
Well,
it's so that it helps everything, helps the forest breathe to top off trees." That's a
basically,
bunch of,
even though we have even though the forester didn't say it was necessary, but said what it would take to, fill it in, and even though we don't have any enforcement authority to do it, we are recommending a certain that the forester's planting recommendations be adopted, and the owner is agreeing to it. Now that
oh, good.
keeping that in mind, because this is what I said, I was like, I want this to be more of a neighborly thing at this moment because the laws aren't there,
Mhm.
and I asked him if he would be okay with it, and he agreed because he seems like a good-natured, amenable guy who just got caught up in something. He probably asked someone, "Can I top those trees?" And they just said yes. And now he
What,
just wants it to go away. But
yeah.
right now we're handling it like neighbors, and we need this law so it can just be not to so it can be clear cut.
Yeah.
Not
Well,
to-
the thing, yeah, but the thing about
What
it is to
about
say
it?
to say that you're not enforcement, but the thing that the part that gets me going is I was on the planning board. I know that the planning board can require things on a site plan, and there's no excuse, in my view, for the planning board to. And it's not like you've handled it as neighbors, but in my view, you can handle it as a requirement because by law you can say, if you're getting past the planning board is has to approve the site plan. And we, the planning board, are not going to approve the site plan until you add to the site plan all the trees you're planning to plant to repair the view
We're not the
shed.
planning board, Laura. Can we just move with our
Yeah.
meeting?
Yeah,
Well, well,
and that
but
with that being said, Laura, if I may, I totally agree with you. I hear what you're saying, and that's how I act essentially when I take these votes, and that's how I hope, the planning board will act. That being said, um, you know, we have an opportunity to move this thing forward, and we're doing it. I want just to be careful not to murk the water. So if we were going to respond to it, I would say it should just be congenial and thanking them for, submitting their response to us, that we're going to take it into consideration. Like Ed said, let's ask if they have a definition for viewshed district and see, and maybe that will in and of itself will spurn a conversation that will help the planning board get
right,
some.
okay, all
We're going
right,
to come there.
okay. So I'll think about that. And the
When
reason
it's
why,
written.
yeah, but the reason why, and Jeff, to your comment, well, we're not the planning board. The reason why I bring this up is because I'm hoping for an answer to how the planning board can not understand that they do have control over the site plan and they can require planning on the site plan, and it just confuses me. So that's just my comment. But anyway, so I know we're beyond our hour, but we're not beyond an hour and a half. So what I'll probably do is I'll just figure out a statement. Like you say, the statement really ought to be, from a ZRC standpoint, we're working on a document and we look forward to seeing what the planning board sends out, because we've got ideas being folded in and we'll take more ideas. And I may put a couple of things in and I'll send it to Ed and Connor before I send anything to Melissa, because again, it's not due until Friday. I'll just send what I might send to Ed and Connor to just make sure that I'm, that I'm responding responsibly, but not with stuff that's going to muddy the water. So
Yeah, I mean,
I'll follow up with that and
my
Connor.
my whole thing here is let's just not ask them a bunch of questions that we're already in hot pursuit of.
Right.
We'll come to them with the answers, and see what they have. If you want,
Okay.
you can just CC me on the email. I'm sure it'll be fine. But that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, well, no, I'd like to send a draft to you and Ed because I definitely, I mean, it's a total redirect of what I was thinking. So, anyway, so I very likely will send something to you and Ed and just see see what you think. But but yeah, so many good ideas here. But you probably already shared those good ideas. But like you're saying, you and Ed are already folding stuff in to what you're drafting. So I don't really maybe don't need to feed stuff to the planning board so they can just feed it back to us. I get that. So let me sleep on it and figure out what I think is a good answer, and I'll share it with Ed and Connor first. So, okay, so excellent discussion. So getting back to my previous question, and that is, let me go back to the agenda. So should we just say, well, we're gonna have at our next meeting, we'll have the Housing Oversight Task Force presentation. Do we want to start talking about NC and the LI1 law, or do we just want to say our next focus area is going to be the scenic overlay? I wanted to fill in gaps. If we have gaps before we get to scenic overlay, we might be able to start talking about NCLI1. Do we want to, or just want to see where we are with scenic overlay next time to figure out what the next thing is that we really deep dive into? What do we want? Do we want to do NC? The NCLI1 is a matter of reviewing a document that already exists. Scenic overlay is looking at something that Connor and Ed are drafting.
I think it depends on whether Connor and Ed are finished drafting by the next meeting. So
Yeah,
it's up to them.
I would say it's probably safe to say that you could start to put your toes in the NCLI waters. I mean, I don't want to be overly ambitious. I think, we have a lot of stuff going right now, but I want to see what happens January 20th, what they come back with. I'm putting more positive pressure on Bill to keep me in the loop with this stuff. But whether or not the planning board comes up with their own recommendations, and regardless of whether the county planner ends up coming through, if we don't get any response there, then we're going to have our own language to submit to the zoning revision committee, and I would think early February is when we'd probably have that.
Okay. All right.
down.
Well, so we'll check. We'll check then. Well, when we meet in 2 weeks, we'll assess again. When do we want to do the NCLI1 law? And it may be that scenic overlay is ready to go. So, okay. All righty. Any final thoughts from anybody? Well, let me first stop sharing so we can all actually see everybody. Yay. So that I can see if you're trying to talk and if you're on mute. Is there any other thing that people wanted to talk about on this call?
No, but thank you everyone for your hard work. Let's get it.
Well, thank you for your hard work, Connor, and being on the planning board. So besides being here, you're over there too. So, and I think this is a really hot topic, and I think it's great that we're playing a part in it. So,
I can feel some momentum. It's nice.
Yay. So do I have any motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Connor, do I have a second?
Yes.
Yes, Ed. All in favor? Aye. Yay.
I just want to point out one quick thing. The LI law proposed changes actually will allow libraries in the LI, which is all of what we're trying to get done with moving the library to Appendix F. Just saying.
Cool. An advantage to it. We see an advantage already. So, all right. So meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much, everybody. And we'll talk in 2 weeks, and I'll be communicating with Connor and Ed before then.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.